The silence in the snowbound village was absolute. No wind, no creaking branches, just a white, lifeless blanket that had swallowed houses, roads, and sound. Sergei was the only one left. The last person who hadn't managed to evacuate before the anomalous freeze descended suddenly, like a verdict. Daylight faded quickly, and the blue gloom of the polar night enveloped everything. In his small house, Sergei stoked the stove with his last logs of wood, listening as the temperature outside plunged to -50. He wrapped himself in 2 blankets, but the cold seeped through cracks in the window frames, leaving intricate ice patterns on the glass. That's when he first heard the creak. Not the groan of floorboards, no. This was a sound like ice breaking under someone's weight. Only the weight felt wrong, halting as if something were being dragged through the snow, pausing intermittently. The creaking came from right under the window. Sergei froze, listening. Nothing. He thought it was just a tree shedding snow, but the trees around had stood bare as bones for weeks. An hour later, the creak came again, closer. Now it came from the porch, a long, slow scrape, as if something was struggling up the ice-crusted steps. Sergei grabbed an axe, approached the door, and looked through the peephole. Nothing but darkness. He slid the bolt and yanked the door open. No one was on the porch, only smooth, untouched snow. No tracks, no indentations. He was about to close the door when his gaze fell on the threshold. A single detail was imprinted in the snow. A deep, perfectly round hole, as if someone had driven a sharp pole into it, and around it barely visible cracks like a spider's web. Sergei slammed the door shut, locking every bolt. Logic screamed. Hallucinations from the cold, the isolation. But instinct whispered something ancient and far more terrifying. The stove went out. The temperature inside began to drop at an alarming rate. Frost bloomed on the inside of the windows in minutes. Sergei trembled, bundled in blankets on the bed. He closed his eyes, trying to sleep to conserve energy. A soft tapping woke him. Tap, tap, tap. As if someone were cautiously rapping on the glass with a long, thin fingernail. Sergei opened his eyes and saw it. Outside the window, in the blue dark, stood a figure, human-sized, but distorted beyond recognition by the cold. Its body seemed twisted from ice and shadows, its long, thin limbs bent at unnatural angles. It had no face, only a smooth, reflective, icy surface in which Sergei saw his own horror-contorted reflection. The creature leaned forward and tapped again. A thin, icy finger left a crumbling web of cracks on the glass. Sergei jerked back, stumbled, and fell to the floor. He scrambled backward, never taking his eyes off the window. The creature didn't move, only swayed slightly, as if in a non-existent wind. Then it vanished. Sergei caught his breath, convincing himself it was a nightmare. But then he heard a new sound, a scraping, hissing noise coming from inside the house, from under the floor in the corner of the room, where the hatch to the cellar was. He crawled toward the hatch, unable to believe it. The wooden cover was dusted with frost, and from the cracks around it seeped not light, but a thick, freezing fog that spread across the floor, turning the planks into slippery ice. Something was down there. Something had broken through the ice in the cellar and was now rising up. Sergei jumped up, grabbed the axe. His mind raced frantically. Run outside meant certain death from the cold and that thing. Stay, whatever was in the cellar was about to emerge. With a desperate cry, he swung the axe and struck the hatch. The wood splintered. Instantly, an icy spike, long and sharp as a spear shot from the crack. It whistled past Sergei's face, missing by centimeters, and embedded itself in the ceiling with a faint ring. Sergei recoiled. Cold was pouring from the broken hatch. Not just an absence of heat, a living, purposeful cold that was seeking him. He saw frost creeping over his felt boots, felt the blankets grow brittle and icy to the touch. He understood this was the end. The creature outside the window and the thing in the cellar were one and the same. It was just playing with him like a cat with a mouse, driving him into a corner. Sergei's last thought was a strange realization. The anomalous freeze that had gripped the village, had it come on its own, or had something brought it? He fell to his knees, no longer feeling the floor beneath him. His breath turned to icy dust. Shadows danced before his eyes, and the last thing he saw before darkness swallowed him was the smooth, icy face leaning over him. In his reflection on that face, there was no fear, no pain, only emptiness, absolute, eternal winter emptiness. In the morning, rescuers found the village frozen solid. Sergei's house was encased in a thick, perfectly smooth layer of ice, like a sarcophagus. Inside, on the floor, they found only a strange statue, a humanoid figure carved from black, transparent ice, its face frozen in a silent scream. And around it, on the white snow leading into the forest, were dozens of those same small, perfectly round holes, as if something had left, satisfied with its prey. And as it left behind silence, deaf, all-consuming winter silence. That year, winter came not just cold, but quiet. So quiet, it began to feel like the world was no longer alive. The snow fell thickly, a cottony shroud, muffling every sound. The creak of a branch, the rustle of freezing pine needles, even his own heartbeat. Ilya was alone at a deserted forest weather station, stranded by a stupid adventure, a personal retreat, a hermitage for the soul. His phone died on the second day. The radio was silent. The road was buried so deeply that even the thought of walking seemed like madness. The first day of solitude was almost pleasant. He read, drank tea, stared out the window at the endless white porridge. On the second day, he noticed something strange. Footprints. Not under the window, no, but in the clean, untouched field behind the station. A lone chain of clear imprints from bare human feet. They came from the forest, straight to the back wall of the building, and there they stopped, as if someone had walked right up and dissolved, or stood still, unmoving, for hours. There was no blood on the snow, no signs of frostbite, just strange, oddly perfect prints. An icy knot of fear stirred under his ribs. He checked all the locks and shutters. That night, through the howling wind, he imagined he heard sounds, not scratching, but soft, wet slaps on the snow. He didn't dare look. On the third day, the footprints were everywhere, a ring around the station. On the roof, clear prints directly above his bedroom, and always barefoot, always human, but with unnaturally long toes. And he also started finding things in the snow, not his. An old doll with its eyes gouged out, frozen to the hardness of stone. A rusty compass, whose needle spun wildly, as if trying to point in all directions at once. And a photograph, faded, pre-war, a family portrait, happy people in front of a wooden house. On the back, an inscription: Winter 1937, all alive. And someone else, in a different hand, had written in blue ink, no. The silence became oppressive. It wasn't an emptiness, but an entity. It absorbed sound greedily, like a sponge. When Ilya fell and broke a mug, the clatter of the shards was brief and muffled, as if swallowed immediately. His own breathing began to seem unbearably loud, a brazen violation of the rules, and he instinctively began to breathe more quietly. On the fourth day, the birds disappeared, the wind died, the snowfall stopped, and a dead, perfectly mirrored whiteness settled under a leaden sky. And the footprints led right to the door, and stood there, facing the threshold. In the snow, where the shadow of his body fell, he saw another shadow tall, with a disproportionately elongated neck and two long arms. It was behind him. He turned around. No one. His heart hammered somewhere in his throat. He lit all the lamps, stoked the stove until it glowed red. But the cold wasn't coming from outside. It was seeping from within, from the very core of his bones. In the window panes, covered with frost patterns, faces began to appear, vague, distorted, like the faces of drowned people under ice. They didn't knock. They just watched. When darkness fell, it came. Ilya heard it by a change in the silence. The silence became saturated, full of soundless presence. It was outside the window, tall, pale as a cast of packed snow. Its features blurred, as if erased by the wind, but in place of eyes two dark, bottomless hollows. It was barefoot. Its long, bony fingers slowly slid across the glass, leaving not wet, but freezing streaks. It wanted to come in. Ilya recoiled, slammed the curtains shut, but the cold, sweetish smell of old snow and frozen earth already hung in the room. He heard something fall in the kitchen. Then upstairs, a floorboard creaked under someone's weight. It was already inside. It had always been inside. Since that very first night, since those first footprints. It was just waiting for the silence to do its work until it had eaten away all the sounds, leaving only the void where it was so easy to appear. He locked himself in the storeroom, gasping, pressing his palm to his mouth to muffle the chattering of his teeth. Outside, beyond the thin door, footsteps sounded, slow slapping. They stopped right in front of the door. Silence. Then a soft sound. The sound of inhaled air. It pressed against the crack under the door and sniffed his fear. A long, wet, icy inhalation. The doorknob began to turn, slowly, with a creak. Ilya scrambled back into the corner, feeling the wall behind him. His gaze fell on an old, frost-covered thermometer lying on the floor. The column of mercury had fallen far below the last mark on the scale into the white emptiness. The crack under the door grew dark. Something was there. Something was watching him. And then he understood the most horrible thing. It didn't want to kill him. Winter doesn't kill. It just makes things quiet. It freezes, preserves, turns you into part of the landscape. He would become another silent object in this white desert. Like the doll, like the photograph, like it itself. The knob turned all the way. The latch clicked softly open. The door swung inward without a sound. And the silence outside was absolute, complete, and final. It waited to receive him. That evening, the blizzard began unexpectedly. Anton stepped out of the last store on the edge of town, clutching a bag of canned goods. He was late. Everyone else had long since gone home, warned of the approaching storm. But his forestry work had held him up, and his refrigerator was empty. Snow fell in thick, heavy flakes, shrouding the world in a white pall. The streetlights were already failing, their light trembling in the swirls. Anton zipped his jacket up to his chin and stepped into the white gloom. His house stood half a kilometer from town, on the edge of the old forest. Usually, the walk took 10 minutes. Today, it seemed endless. At first, he just walked, chin tucked into his collar, counting his steps. Then he began to feel it. Someone was watching. A sensation of icy touch on the back of his neck. Not physical, but as if the very darkness between the trees had gained sight. Anton looked back. Nothing. Only snowflakes dancing in the streetlight's glow and the black silhouettes of pines. He quickened his pace. The headphones he'd put on to drown out the wind's howl suddenly crackled. Through the music, something else broke through a whisper. Unclear, broken, as if words were shattering against ice. Stay. Anton tore off the headphones. Just the wind, just the blizzard. But the whisper didn't fade. It came from everywhere, from the very veil of snow. With us, he started to run. His legs sank into snowdrifts. His breath became a hot ball in his chest. The house was closed now, its lights barely discernible through the snowy curtain. Suddenly, silence. The blizzard ceased, as if it had never been. Snow hung motionless in the air, and in this sudden silence, Anton heard something that froze the blood in his veins. A crunch, a slow, measured crunch of footsteps on frozen snow, right behind him. He didn't dare turn around, his body petrified, his eyelids refusing to blink, glued to the sight of his own suspended breath. The footsteps grew closer, stopped. Anton felt an icy breath on his neck, a smell of ancient ice and damp earth, the smell of the deepest permafrost. "You are walking on our home," rustled a voice right at his ear. A voice without warmth, without life, made of cracking ice and grinding stones. Anton lunged forward. His house was just 20 meters away now, the living room window glowing with a yellow, homely light, a saving light. He reached the porch, burst inside, slammed the door, and locked every bolt, leaned against the wood, his heart pounding as if trying to escape. Warmth, silence, only the ticking of the kitchen clock. Anton walked to the window and pulled back the curtain. On the doorstep, right in the streetlight's beam, stood a figure, tall, thin, made of shadows and frost. It had no face, only a dark hollow in which two pale points floated like distant stars in an icy night. It didn't move. It simply stood and watched. Anton recoiled, closed the curtains. "It's just fatigue, hallucinations," he repeated to himself, pouring water into his trembling hands. He turned on the TV to drown out the silence. Images flickered on the screen, but the sound was strange through the announcer's voice. That same whisper broke through. "You are in our home, and we are in yours." Anton turned off the TV. Silence descended again, but now it was different, wary, tense, as if the house was holding its breath. And then he heard it from above, from the attic. A faint scratching, as if something large, clumsy, was slowly moving across the old boards. Anton never used the attic. It was accessed by a small door in the corridor ceiling, always locked with a key. The scratching repeated, closer now. Then a soft, wet sound, like melting ice dripping onto wood. He looked up at the attic hatch and saw it. A dark, wet stain was spreading from the edges of the wooden lid. It spread, forming thin trickles that ran down the wall. It smelled of permafrost, the very same he had sensed outside. A dark, almost black liquid fell from the edge of the hatch onto the floor, a centimeter from his foot. The hatch slowly opened, a millimeter, then another. A cold wafted from the crack, freezing the very air in the room. And then Anton saw an eye, pale, almost white, without a pupil. It stared from the crack, motionless, unblinking. The hatch began to open wider, slowly, with a creak that cut to the soul. Anton staggered back, stumbled, fell onto his back. He scrambled toward the door, not taking his eyes off the black rectangle growing larger. From the opening space, came a breath, slow wheezing, as if lungs were filled with crushed ice. Anton ran outside, not thinking about the blizzard, the cold, or that figure that might be waiting for him out there. Any danger there was better than this thing in his house. The blizzard raged again, but now the snow fell strangely, slowly, almost lazily, and each flake was the size of a palm. The figure on the doorstep was gone, but in the snow leading from the door into the forest, there were tracks, not human, long with deep claw marks, as if something heavy and many-legged had dragged itself toward his house. The tracks didn't lead from the forest. They led to the forest from his doorstep. And then Anton understood. It hadn't come from outside. It had come from inside, from his house. And now it was waiting for him out there, among the trees, which had begun to slowly, almost imperceptibly, bow their branches toward the ground, as if paying homage to something moving between them. He remained standing on the threshold of his house, looking at the black maw of the open door behind his back and at the white, endless forest before him. And the blizzard softly sang an old lullaby in his ear, one his grandmother had sung to him as a child. Only the words were different, icy and merciless. Sleep deep beneath the snow. Here lies your den forevermore. We've lived in you so long. Your body is our home. Anton realized he had never truly been alone in this house, and he never would be again. He took a step forward toward the forest darkness, as behind his back the door slowly, with a creak, closed by itself. And on the window, frosted over from the inside, words slowly appeared, as if traced by someone's icy finger. We are home.